I never imagined my fascination with abandoned places would lead to something so horrifying. As a graphic designer, I thrive on the aesthetics of decay, capturing the beauty of forgotten spaces with my camera. After months of searching online for my next location, I stumbled upon a name that sent shivers down my spine: Whitmore Asylum. Nestled deep in rural Pennsylvania, it had been shut down for decades, its walls whispering secrets of the past. It was an overcast afternoon when I finally decided to go. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. As I parked my car on the gravel path leading up to the asylum, an unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. I dismissed it, convincing myself it was just nerves. Armed with my camera and a flashlight, I stepped into the heavy silence, the trees standing like sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The entrance groaned as I pushed against it, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with peeling wallpaper and rusting metal fixtures. Every step echoed through the empty halls, a cacophony of creaks and distant thuds. I felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the oppressive weight of the emptiness surrounding me. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and something faint and rotten that made my stomach churn. As I moved deeper, I noticed remnants of lives once lived: broken wheelchairs, rusted bed frames, and scattered notes. I snapped photos, the flash illuminating the darkness for just a brief moment, almost like a heartbeat in the void. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught movement. I froze, heart pounding. A shadow darted past, too quick to identify. I called out, but my voice felt swallowed by the silence. Pushing my fear aside, I continued down the corridor, each step heavier than the last. I reached the common room, where remnants of a once vibrant life lingered. Old newspapers lay strewn about. One headline caught my eye: "Patients missing from Whitmore Asylum." My blood ran cold. Just as my mind began to spiral, a low moan reverberated through the air, sending chills racing down my spine. I swung my flashlight around, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing ghostly figures etched into the faded walls, faces twisted in agony, eyes hollow. Was it just my imagination? I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the encroaching dread. But then I heard it again, closer this time, a soft, raspy whisper, almost like a plea. "Help me." Ice gripped my heart as I turned toward the sound. The shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into something more tangible. I backed away slowly, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The air thickened, and a rancid smell enveloped me, overwhelming my senses. I stumbled into a room, desperate for escape, only to find myself in what appeared to be a makeshift examination area. The walls were stained, and old medical instruments lay scattered about. In the corner stood a cracked, dusty mirror. I approached it cautiously, expecting to see my reflection, but what stared back was a warped visage, eyes sunken and filled with despair. I blinked, and the reflection smiled, a sickening, twisted grin that wasn't mine. Panic surged through me. I spun around, racing back to the hallway, but the air felt heavier, almost viscous. I felt as if I was being pulled back, as if the asylum was hungry for my fear. The whispers intensified, now a chorus of voices, begging, pleading, echoing through the hallways. "Stay, stay with us." I sprinted toward the exit, the flashlight flickering ominously. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of tortured souls chanting my name, each syllable like a razor against my skin. I burst through the door, the chill of the outside air hitting me like a wave. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, the weight of the asylum lifting only as I slammed the door shut behind me. As I drove away, my heart racing, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the dark forest closing in behind me. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought I could finally breathe easy. But then I heard it, a faint whisper drifting through the stillness of my room, soft and chilling. "You'll come back." And I knew I didn't have a choice.
I still hear whispers every night, coming from my own home. I moved into this creaking Victorian house last autumn, drawn by its charm and how the fading light painted the walls in warm hues at dusk. As a freelance writer, I sought inspiration from the quiet town of Harper's Hollow. The locals were friendly but wary, sharing hushed tales about the house's past, a family that vanished without a trace. I dismissed their warnings as rural superstition, comforted by the belief that I was a rational adult, not one to believe in ghosts or curses. At first, everything seemed normal. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and the floorboards creaked underfoot, signs of the house settling. I felt drawn to the attic, a cramped space filled with forgotten relics and cobwebs. One evening, while rummaging through boxes, I found an old journal. Its pages were yellowed and filled with frantic scrawls detailing a woman's descent into paranoia. The last entry sent chills down my spine. They watch me from the walls. I can feel their breath. Ignoring the unease, I tucked the journal away, dismissing it as the ramblings of a disturbed mind. That night, however, something shifted. An inexplicable chill settled in my chest. I awoke to scratching sounds, like fingernails against wood. Heart pounding, I listened. The noise pulsed with a life of its own, echoing through the hallways, urging me to investigate. As I stepped into the dim corridor, the air thickened. The walls felt alive, pulsing softly as I touched them. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. I followed the sound, feeling cold seep into my bones. It led me to the living room, where the fireplace flickered. I froze, breath hitching as I saw a shadow dart behind the curtains. My heart raced, and the smell of damp earth filled the air, mingling with decay. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence hung thickly. I stepped toward the window, the floorboards creaking beneath me, and pulled aside the curtain. Nothing, just the empty street and the glow of street lamps. As I turned away, a sudden chill brushed my neck, an icy breath from the shadows. My heart stopped. I spun back, but the room was empty. Days blurred into restless nights and uneasy days. I could no longer write. My words fled, replaced by a gnawing need to understand what haunted my home. I returned to the journal, desperate for answers. I pieced together fragments of the woman's agony, hearing voices, feeling eyes on her, the grip of something unseen. The final entry was a plea. If you hear them, don't listen. They crave your fear. Every night, I felt them drawing closer, whispers wrapping around me like a shroud. They were soft at first, like a lover's caress, but quickly turned sinister. I could no longer tell if the voices were in my head or echoed from the walls. I began to lose track of time, reality slipping like sand through my fingers. I could hear them clearly now, murmurs of discontent and longing, a mocking lullaby that lured me deeper into the house's grip. One evening, as shadows stretched long, I found myself before the attic door again, compelled by an invisible force. The scratching intensified, frantic and pleading. Hesitating, I hovered over the doorknob, sweat trailing down my spine. When I turned the knob, a rush of stale air engulfed me, thick with mildew and something far more putrid. The attic was darker than I remembered, corners swallowed by shadows. My breath quickened as I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning ominously beneath me. The journal lay open on the floor, pages flapping as if caught in an unseen wind. I bent down to read, hands shaking. The words blurred, twisting and turning, and then silence. The whispers faded, replaced by a heavy weight on my chest. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, the air crackling with tension. I whipped around, heart racing, and froze. In the corner stood a figure, indistinct and shrouded, vibrating with a hunger that sent ice through my veins. I could barely breathe as it glided toward me, form shifting like smoke. Panic surged, and I stumbled back, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The figure drew closer, the cold seeping deeper into my marrow. A voice, soft yet distorted, slithered into my ears. "You must listen." I clawed at my throat, desperate to scream, but no sound escaped. The room spun, shadows danced, and the walls closed in. I felt it pressing against my mind, sifting through thoughts, feeding off my fear. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguish and delight, drowning out my own thoughts. Then, without warning, everything went dark. The air thinned, and I felt myself falling, engulfed in silence. I woke the next morning on the attic floor, the journal beside me, pages blank. Sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating dust motes. The whispers had faded, replaced by eerie calm. But something was different. I realized I was no longer alone. The walls felt closer, the air heavier, and I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my vision. A shadow lingered, just beyond the light, watching, waiting. I don't leave the house anymore. I don't sleep. I sit at my desk, fingers poised above the keys, listening to the whispers that have returned, shadows creeping closer. My thoughts swirl like the dust around me, fragmented yet sharp, and deep down, I know they're waiting for something I don't understand. All I can do is listen.
I never thought ghost stories could become reality until I found myself back in my childhood home. After college, I moved in with my parents to save money and plan my next steps. The creaky floorboards and peeling wallpaper were familiar, yet felt different, heavier, as if burdened by forgotten secrets. The initial nights were calm. I settled into a routine, but soon noticed oddities. The air thickened at night, and faint whispers seemed to slither through the walls. I initially dismissed it as my imagination, a byproduct of sleepless nights and too many horror films. But one night, the sound of soft, rhythmic tapping from the basement sent chills down my spine. I debated investigating the noise, torn between fear and curiosity. Tiptoeing down the narrow hallway, the wooden floors groaned beneath me. The smell of dampness hung in the air as I reached the slightly ajar basement door. The darkness beyond pulsed, inviting me in with a sinister whisper. Hesitating, I felt fear wrap around my throat, but something urged me forward. I pushed the door open and descended the rickety stairs, each step creaking ominously. The basement was a tomb of forgotten memories, old furniture draped in dusty sheets and boxes stacked high, filled with things I barely recognized. The tapping grew louder, echoing against the concrete walls like a heartbeat. Venturing further into the gloom, I saw a faint light flickering in the corner. My breath hitched, the stale air thick with mildew and something metallic. I inched closer, the tapping replaced by soft, desperate scratching, like fingernails on wood. My heart raced as I approached the light's source, a small, splintered box with strange symbols carved into it. The scratching intensified, pulling me in as if unseen hands beckoned me to open it. Sweat trickled down my spine, a mix of fear and thrill. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside were old photographs, their edges browned and frayed. Flipping through them, nausea washed over me. Each photo showed familiar faces, family and friends, caught in moments of despair, their expressions twisted in anguish. I dropped the box, scattering the photos like fallen leaves. And then I heard it. A low, guttural growl emerged from the shadows, sending adrenaline surging through me. I turned, but there was nothing, just oppressive darkness closing in like a predator. The scratching resumed, now accompanied by a soft sobbing. I stumbled back, tripping over the box. I was not alone. The air shifted, the temperature dropping as if a heavy blanket had settled over me. I stumbled toward the stairs, panic clawing at my throat. The sobbing grew louder, a wailing that pierced through the silence, echoing in my mind. I could almost see the faces from the photos emerging from the shadows, their mouths twisted in silent screams. I was nearly at the top when the floorboards creaked behind me, something heavy dragging itself closer. I bolted up the final steps, slamming the basement door shut and leaning against it, my heart racing. Pressing my ear to the wood, I strained to hear. The sobbing had ceased, replaced by a dead silence so profound it felt like a presence. I locked the door, knowing it wouldn't keep whatever lurked down there contained. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with thoughts of the box, the photos, and the tortured souls trapped in darkness. I felt their eyes on me, watching, waiting for my return. Days passed, and I tried to ignore the dread settling in my chest. Each night, the whispers grew more insistent, creeping into my dreams. I began to see shadows flitting past my peripheral vision, always just out of sight. Then came nights when I would wake, convinced someone stood at the foot of my bed, breathing in the darkness, their presence palpable, yet unseen. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I returned to the basement. The air was stifling, thick with impending doom. I approached the box, heart racing, the photographs still scattered across the floor. As I gathered them, a chill brushed against my neck, and I felt the presence looming behind me. I didn't turn around. Instead, I clutched the photos tightly and bolted up the stairs, slamming the door once more. But the whispers did not fade. They grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices pleading for release. I pressed my back against the door, feeling its vibrations as something began to scratch at the wood, frantic and relentless. I don't know what I'll do next. All I know is that sleep doesn't come easy anymore, and each night, as the shadows stretch and the whispers grow louder, I feel more like I'm being pulled into that box of memories where hope goes to die. I can't tell if it's the past haunting me or something alive waiting for the right moment to strike. All I know is that the basement is calling, and it won't let me go.
I thought I was alone, but the walls were listening. My name is Sarah, a 27-year-old graphic designer who had just moved into a quaint old house on the outskirts of Boston. I was drawn to the place. The sunlight filtering through ancient trees, the creaky floorboards whispering stories of the past. It was the refuge I needed after a painful breakup. I filled the empty rooms with my favorite art and furniture, hoping to breathe new life into the space. Yet as I settled in, an unsettling sensation clung to the air, a feeling I couldn't shake off. At night, the house transformed. The creaks and groans of the floorboards became an eerie symphony, echoing through the darkened hallways. I often woke to soft tapping, like fingers drumming on the walls. It felt like someone or something was trying to get my attention. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, fueled by the isolation of my new surroundings. But as days turned to weeks, the tapping grew louder, more insistent. One evening, while sketching at my desk, a rancid smell filled the air, thick and nauseating, like wet earth and decay. I turned, expecting to find something rotten in the kitchen, but there was nothing. The smell lingered, clinging to my clothes and making my stomach churn. I opened the window for fresh air, but the scent only intensified, swirling around me like a ghostly embrace. That's when I heard it, a muffled voice, low and unintelligible, coming from the wall behind my desk. My heart raced as I pressed my ear against the cold plaster, straining to catch the words. It sounded like a whisper, a beckoning call that curled its icy fingers around my spine. I crawled into bed that night, the sheets feeling like a trap. The tapping resumed, now accompanied by a soft moan, almost like a lament. I pulled the covers over my head, hoping to drown it out. But the sound seeped through the fabric, burrowing into my mind. Sleep refused to come, and I lay wide-eyed, staring into the darkness, listening to the tortured song of the house. Days passed, and the whispers grew more distinct. I began to jot down the words that floated into my consciousness. Help me. Find me. The more I listened, the more it sounded like a plea, a cry for assistance that sent chills down my spine. Each night I would try to sleep, only to be met with sounds that tore through the silence, drawing me deeper into this haunting. Desperate for answers, I decided to explore the attic, a shadowy space I had avoided. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed the rickety stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. Dust danced in the beam of light as I surveyed the clutter, old boxes, broken furniture, and cobweb-covered relics of the past. In the far corner, I spotted an old trunk, its wood warped and splintered. My hand trembled as I reached for the latch. It creaked open, releasing a wave of musty air. Inside lay a collection of yellowed photographs, faces staring back at me, their eyes filled with sorrow. As I sifted through the photographs, a pair of eyes caught my attention. A girl, maybe 13, with hollowed cheeks and a sunken smile. The resemblance was uncanny. She looked just like me. A shiver raced down my spine as the air in the attic grew heavier, charged with a presence that felt both foreign and familiar. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm, and I dropped the photographs, a sharp crack echoing through the silence as they scattered across the floor. That night, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The whispers morphed into a cacophony, swirling in my mind. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it was relentless. The walls pulsed with the rhythm of my racing heart, and I felt a cold breath against my neck, sending me bolting upright in bed. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls as if they were alive, taunting me. I decided to confront whatever haunted my home. Armed with a candle and my resolve, I stood in the living room, calling out to the presence that had claimed my nights. "I know you're here. What do you want?" The silence thickened, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. Then the tapping resumed, louder and more aggressive, almost urging me to listen. And then it happened. The room shuddered. The lights flickered ominously, and the whispers coalesced into a single voice, deep and resonant. "You shouldn't have come here." The air grew frigid, swirling as if the very walls were closing in on me. Panic surged through my veins as I stumbled back, my candle flickering violently. I could feel a presence pressing against me, suffocating. The walls seemed to pulse alive with energy, and I knew I had awakened something that should have remained dormant. I ran, bursting through the front door into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I couldn't stop. I didn't look back, but even as I fled, I could hear the whispers echoing in my mind. "Help me. Find me." They lingered, haunting me as I ran into the darkness, not knowing if I would ever escape the claws of the past awakened within those walls, or if they had already claimed me as their own.